Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the President of the U.S. Green Building Council, Roger Platt.
Hello, Greenbuild. That was a wonderful, wonderful video from our friends at Colgate-Palmolive. And if you needed any further evidence that this is no longer about just energy efficiency, that beautiful video makes that point very powerfully. Colgate-Palmolive is also the winner of the spectacularly sought-after Ray Anderson Radical Industrialist Award. Give it up for Colgate-Palmolive. This is the part of Greenbuild where we think back on what's happened and what we're most excited about experiencing and perhaps most eager for others to experience. And I don't even have to tell you, because so many of you have already told me, that one of the great, great highlights was the beautiful, touching, and powerful presentation and dialogue between James Cameron and Mika Brzezinski. There were, of course, wonderful summits, including my favorite summit, the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Summit. There were wonderful speakers from Deepak Chopra to Mahesh Ramanujam. Bonding events like the Women in Green with Rachel Gutter and Kimberly Lewis. Absolutely unscripted, remarkable Greenbuild moments, like the moment when Mika and out of nowhere, Joe Scarborough arrives and comes and speaks to the Emerging Young Leaders group here. I mean, can you imagine just going into your Emerging Leaders event and suddenly Joe and Mika are in there talking? These are special Greenbuild moments. And as always, 3 football fields of what we used to call the new energy economy, but as that video reminds us, the new water efficiency economy, the new healthy meets green economy, the green economy. It's spectacular. So, we've all had this special experience. And when we do, we realize, as the science fiction writer William Gibson once said, the future is now. It's just not terribly well distributed. And so, we need to distribute this experience more, and I will take the prerogative as president to announce an initiative to make sure that we have more, way more than 100 scholarships next year, that we build up that scholarship program so more people can experience this extraordinary event. And just to give you a sense of how extraordinary those scholarships are and how they change lives and what kinds of people get those scholarships, I'm going to just give you a sort of personal rundown on 3 moments that I found particularly wonderful at Greenbuild this year. And one of them involves someone who, a few years back, came to this movement in part through a scholarship. The 3 moments for me, my wife knows this a little bit better than I do because I was writing these down even in the taxi coming over here. The 3 moments for me can be summarized in the tamales lady, the health meets well-being from down under moment, and the back rub that may have helped save the planet. So let me take you through each of these one by one. The first is a transformational leader who I had the great honor to be on a panel with, Eli Flores. He explained to a room of starstruck people, this very young gentleman, that he had emerged from a world of, as a young man, poverty, incarceration, growing up without a father, living more often than not in a real sense on the streets of South Central LA. And through a variety of remarkable efforts, principally of his own, he made his way to this wonderful organization, one of the great partners of USGBC, Youth Build. Yes, give it up for Youth Build. Through Youth Build, Ellie got a high school education, actually graduating before some of his peers, and the confidence in himself to understand that he had the ability to build confidence in others, to empower others. And what he really taught me, and what I will talk about later, about an hour later when we start talking about the climate change conference, is that he had this insight that in order to really create change, we need to find a way to build trust that has been way too often broken, and certainly in the streets of South Central LA, trust that has been broken again and again. And we have to find those informal opinion leaders, people that can be trusted and will help build our own integrity and our trust. And so the tamales lady who in his neighborhood, people would come, and the tamales lady, you would give her a couple of dollars and she would give you some tamales. Maybe some days you didn't have the $2 and she still gave you the tamales. But she was someone who knew that neighborhood and knew people of multiple generations. And so once the tamales lady was on his side, he was able to be part of an extraordinary program putting 600 solar panels on roofs absolutely for free, taking these houses off the grid in LA. But really, again, there was so much distrust of government, so much distrust of programs, free or not, that had certainly done nothing for South Central LA, that it took really building the confidence of people in the community so that he could have the ability to do what he did. He went on, the rest of his career is just staggering. The guy is, getting kudos from congressmen and just, again, we're so proud of our alumni of the scholarship program, and we need to have more of them. Now, he knew that, as Rick said earlier, there's work to be done, so we need to do it. And one of the things that I also thought was a remarkable moment was when we found out, and I wish it was an American real estate company, but it was an Australian real estate company that made an extraordinary commitment in Asia, in Australia, in the UK, in the United States, to build buildings that were ready to ensure that their tenants could take advantage of a super healthy environment, well certified space. And if you still haven't gotten it about this well certification, let me tell you a few things right now. These Australians get it. And what they understand is something that I heard repeatedly when I was listening to folks from this Well Institute talk. And that is that, for example, at the Barclays Bank, you may have read, they gave 75,000 of their employees a Fitbit. And this is a Fitbit, circa 2015. We all know that Fitbits in 2030 are going to tell you everything about your health, about the environment you're in, but they gave them Fitbits. Now that's very far-sighted. However, if they had well certified the space these people were in, for less money than giving everybody a Fitbit, they could have provided 100 medical, intentional, passive ways to make their employees healthier. And this is something that the Australians get. I'm not supposed to say too many names, Lend-Lease. And that is very impressive, and that was a moment for me about leadership. Third, the back rub that may have saved the world. I'm in a lunch, and Rick Fedrizzi is reading from his wonderful new book. And of course, I'd read the book. Hey, he's my boss, but I also thought it would be a good book. And I read the book, and suddenly he's reading one of my favorite passages in the book. This is a very thoughtful, very sophisticated and insightful book, but there's a few passages that also I kind of especially like. And one of them is one where he talks about coming to the White House way back when there was, during the part of the Clinton years. They were doing the greening of the White House. And Rick's there with all of these very brilliant but somewhat gloomy and not, to him, terribly friendly environmentalists. He's the guy from the industry group, and they're just really not sure what to make of him. But maybe in a way that has some connectivity to the tamales lady that I haven't totally figured out. This guy, Amory Lovins, comes over to Rick while all of the other environmentalists are in there just wondering who the hell is he. He's not from NRDC or the Sierra Club. And he gives him a little back rub. Like the two of them knew each other, a lot of mutual respect. And suddenly Rick is like, okay. He's like one of the folks there at the White House. He must be okay if Amory Lovins, superstar of the environmental movement, is giving him a back rub. So those three events also teach us important lessons, and I'll get back to that later. But for now, let's go to the reason you're all here, the wonderful program that you're about to get with remarkable leaders. Now, when we brought such powerhouse leaders as you're going to get, and I'm not going to preview who they are, we needed somebody who could really bring them to life, but also had the gravitas to make sure we were asking the right questions. And so Kevin Klose is that individual. Kevin is somebody who has been a major player both at the National Public Radio, at Radio Free Europe, a writer, an editor at the Washington Post for many, many years. He is basically kind of like the journalist, the people that folks really, really, really respect, and who's done a tremendous amount of both public service and, of course, great service in the Fourth Estate. And so I will let Kevin introduce these folks, and I will be as interested as you as hearing them, and we'll talk to you a bit later. So with no further ado, Kevin Klose.
Good morning, all. Thank you, Roger, for that wonderful introduction and for your wonderful conversation with these great participants in the Green Building Conference of 2015. It's my great pleasure now to introduce our panel, and I will call them up here one by one. We will start with Anna Denell, Head of Corporate Social Responsibility for Vasakronan, the leading Swedish real estate company. Welcome. Jim Hanna, Director of Environmental Impact for the Starbucks Coffee Company. Davor Grgic, who is Chief Information Officer and Vice President for Sustainability of the Kohler Company. And John Mandyck, Chief Sustainability Officer for United Technologies Corporation. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Very special welcome.
Thank you.
Special welcome to you, John. Thank you so much, all. So we are going to start with a brief round robin as our panel introduce themselves and the things that are uppermost in their mind that has to do about work that needs to be done. And I'm going to start right here on my left with John Mandyck from United Technologies. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you. There's so much work that has been done in this room for green buildings, but there's tremendous potential and more work to be done. My company has a firm belief that data drives decisions. We need better data to make better decisions to accelerate the green building movement. And to do that, to accelerate the green building movement, we need to link buildings to health and productivity. I think we have the potential to take this movement to a whole new direction. In the first 20 years of green buildings, we've achieved 47% penetration of green buildings in the commercial construction market. So we asked, what's it going to take to get to 80% in the next 10 years? Health and productivity is the way to go. We have tremendous new research from Harvard University. Dr. Joe Allen's in the front row here. That's breakthrough research that shows that the optimized indoor environmental quality provided by green buildings doubled cognitive function in a study done by Harvard, Syracuse University, and Upstate New York Medical Center. We think this has the potential to change everything with buildings, and as it turns out, intelligence is in the air. There's better thinkings and better buildings. That's the future of the green building movement.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Anna.
Okay, at our company, we have a vision of future-proof cities where people and business can thrive. And we believe that a future-proof city is a city that consumes less energy and that does not emit greenhouse gas emissions. So in 2009, we set an ambitious goal in terms of how much we should reduce our energy consumption. We decided that we, in a few years, should become 50% below the Swedish industry average. So by last year, we had reduced our actual energy consumption in our buildings by 40%, and we are now 50% below energy industry standard in Sweden. And by reducing our energy and to shift to renewable energy sources, we have also achieved a decrease in greenhouse gas emissions by 95%. Thank you. Yes. But future-proof cities are not only about energy and climate change. It's also, we think a future-proof city should also be less dependent on cars. Even if cars in the future will be run on electricity, cars take up so much space in the city, and that space could be used for so much more. Bike lanes, better pedestrian areas, or even plant trees, because planting trees really enhance the health and well-being for people, and it actually contributes to lower your energy consumption, because trees planted near your facade will actually decrease your cooling demand by 40%. So less cars, more trees, and more green. We also believe that future-proof cities needs to be more resilient. We know that we are facing tougher weather conditions, so we need to actually future-proof our buildings in terms of dealing with heavier snow loads, heavier rains, flooding risks, etc. Last but not least, a future-proof city needs to be a better place for humans and to be a place where people can thrive.
Thank you, Anna. Davor.
Good morning. It's good to be here. At Kohler Company, we have, for a number of years now, had a sustainability strategy that really consists of 3 key initiatives. Number 1, lower our internal operational footprint, and we measure that with water, with energy, greenhouse gases, as well as solid waste. And we have a number of programs to drive that, with the overall goal being to be net zero in 2035. On the second pillar of the strategy, which I'm really going to concentrate on today for the most part, is our product strategy. How do we make our products more sustainable incrementally with each new generation of products that we put out? And in particular, in terms of water efficiency, we have been very focused on that for many, many years, starting with the 1970s. And as conditions in the world change and water scarcity becomes more dire, and with the example of California, a number of other places, how do we sort of drive that further? We have worked pretty hard to develop the broadest set of WaterSense product in the industry and to look at new technologies, whether it's for new patented flush technologies to improve both the reliability and efficiency of the flush, or the experience, such as in showering, by injecting air into the water stream and providing a more invigorating experience with less water, those kind of things. The other thing that we've been looking at is to extend our markets into perhaps areas that we normally don't cover, and look what we can do with a program that we call Innovation for Good, where we look at what can we do at the base of the pyramid, what can we do for a number of third world environments. A couple of examples of that are we're engaged with the Gates Foundation on the Reinvent the Toilet Challenge. A lot of the sub-Saharan Africa and Asia areas have a great deal of difficulty with the infrastructure for sewers and sanitation because it simply doesn't exist and it's not cost affordable in those environments. So how do you create a non-sewered sort of sanitation solution that is efficient, reuses water, and has constructive use of the waste that comes out of the process? So we're working with California Institute of Technology and with the Gates Foundation to drive that. In fact, we have some of the first prototypes out in the field. Another is a product that we announced here at Greenbuild is our Clarity filter, which is a very inexpensive product that removes 99% of bacteria and related pathogens out of the water, and is very inexpensive to both use, less than 1 cent per user per day, and gives us the opportunity to start working with partners such as World Vision and other NGOs that work both in the relief and in the development sectors to help us drive improvements in not only human condition, but also carbon footprint. If you think about it, people will actually boil water in a lot of cases and burn wood and create atmospheric pollution, create carbon output that is really unnecessary if you have some of these technologies available to them. So we're very excited about doing that kind of work, and it's been a huge source of engagement for our associates and other stakeholders in our organization. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Jim, Hanna, one has to ask you, of course, about global reach because of what Starbucks does every minute of every day.
And one should never assume, first, is there anyone not familiar with our company, Starbucks? Please raise your hand. I'll buy you a cup of coffee afterwards. But, so, Mark. Yeah. It's going to be an even longer line at that store afterwards, isn't it? But, so our company is over 40 years old, and we were really built on this notion of creating an emotional connection with our customers. And that has been the primary driver of Starbucks from day one. You've all heard of the third place experience that we talk about. It's not home, it's not work, it's this place where you can spend some quality time with your family and friends, get a great cup of coffee. But this third place experience and this emotional connection, I'm taking a bit of a different tack than my fellow panelists here, is really what's driven Starbucks to own this place of how do we lead on addressing both tough societal issues and tough environmental issues as a company. I mean, whether it be race relations or education or disenfranchised youth or returning veterans coming home from wars and getting back into civilizations or getting back into society, how do we tackle these issues and be on the forefront of these issues? And our Green Building Initiative is the same example of that. We chose to take on green building because we knew that our partners, we call our employees partners because they all have ownership in the company, but we know that our partners and our customers would have an emotional engagement with a store that was more comfortable, that was greener, that was just a more welcoming place. And we also knew that we have a pretty significant footprint as a company. We operate 20,000 stores around the world. We're in over 60 countries. There are 70 million people that walk through our doors every week as customers. And we have a pretty significant and, I would say, meaningful footprint on the environment. And as a company that's focusing on how do we take on climate change and how do we tackle climate change, primarily because our primary supply chain of the Arabica coffee bean is at risk from climate change, we know that our ability to tackle this issue is imperative to our company and imperative to our customers. So we tackled green building early on in the initiative. We approached USGBC about 10 years ago and said, look, you're the gold standard for certification out there, but you're designed for office buildings. And how can we create the situation where a Starbucks or another quick service restaurant or another small business can actually utilize the LEED process to verify their stores and to verify their buildings as green. Because LEED, it was built for office buildings, and it just wasn't fit for us. And one thing I love about U.S. Green Building Council and the leadership of U.S. Green Building Council is They're never unwilling to take on a challenge. And they pointed right back to Starbucks and said, all right, you guys go fix that. And we got together with a cohort of like-minded companies and really developed the LEED retail standard from the ground up. And then we were also one of the first companies to utilize the Volume Build certification standard, which made it so much more easy for us to integrate LEED directly into the way we build buildings. We don't even talk about the incremental aspect of LEED anymore. It's just part of the process that we do. And because it's so ingrained in our process, I'm happy to announce that we just hit 700 LEED certified stores in over 20 countries around the world. And we're going to almost double that to 1,200 stores by the end of next year. So really more than any other company in the world. But thank you. But the real value in that is, I think, companies like Starbucks and others who have taken LEED to scale, taken it international, and taken it global, have really created the opportunity for other companies to do the same. And we've gotten the bumps and the bruises along with some other companies out there. And now I think we are paving the way along with this leadership that we've seen from Rick and the other staff members of the U.S. Green Building Council, and how we take that to scale is key. Because we're a scale company. We're not often first to market, but we can take it global. And I think that's a niche we want to continue to play.
Thank you, Jim. I should say that I'm here today. Fortunately, I'm very lucky to be here with my wonderful wife, Deborah Ashford. Between us, we have 7 children and 9 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild. I've told Jim that I'm quite sure that they cover 10 time zones where they live. I'm sure that at least once a day, in every one of those 10 time zones, somebody's looking for Starbucks.
Thank you.
So thank you, Jim, for being here today. And I'll put both hands up when it comes to getting a coffee. So I'd like to continue this discussion and have our panel talk a little bit to each other as we listen in, as to ask each other about such things as, how do you, for example, bring forward to your employees the values that you're espousing for the company at large? What does that, because everything we're hearing from our panelists is that there is a convergence of awareness and then commitment to the health sciences, to building and construction sciences, to architecture, to land use, to virtually every aspect of human life as individuals live it. How do you bring that to how does that help you with your workforces and the questions that they may ask you, and what does it do for you in your company and for your investors who may be further from these commitments than you might think? Sure. So I'd like to start perhaps with, could I ask Jim, would you start us on that?
Well, as I mentioned, I mean, our partner engagement, our employee engagement is essential to the success of our company. And folks in the sustainability space, we've always struggled to make that connection between the work we do and actually driving business. And we've always known anecdotally that sustainability helps raise the halo, it helps minimize liability, it helps do a lot of certain things, but I think the holy grail has always been, how do we create that moment when we know that all the investments we make as sustainability professionals and green building professionals are actually driving sales. And I'm going to get to your question here because it's related. One of the things that Starbucks recently discovered, which is, it's an aha moment, but it's also something we all kind of knew intuitively, was that we can directly connect what we call partner engagement, so engagement of your barista, and how much they enjoy their job, how much they love their company, and how much they really appreciate working for Starbucks. We can directly connect that with sales. And I think all of you would say, well, of course, but to be able to find and quantify that with some good research, we know that we have that connection now. And we also know that the average demographic of our employee is 24 years old, so the average barista serving you is 24 years old, maybe a single parent, maybe seeking a college education. We know that one of the primary drivers of their engagement is sustainability. And when we can demonstrate to them from our headquarters in Seattle and from our design offices all over the world that we're building sustainable stores that they can be proud of, that they can tell their customers about, then we up-level that engagement with those employees, and we can up-level sales. So we made that indirect connection between sales and sustainability investment in that. And frankly, you all know that as working in corporations, recruitment and retention is expensive. And the ability to bring on the best talent in the world is a very expensive proposition, and then keep that talent on board. Once you're able to get those people, they become much more productive employees. And if we can demonstrate, and we have been able to demonstrate, that investment in green building, investment in renewable energy, investment in a sustainable coffee supply chain really elevates that level of connection with those employees, they're going to drive that right back to the customers and create that emotional connection that's so essential for Starbucks. So engagement is key for us, and helping them understand all the great things that we do as a company and attempt to do as a company is important. But transparency is essential too, and I think that that's one of the things that our company is most proud of, is we're very transparent. We share the great stories, we share the number of LEED certified stores we do, but we also share the challenges. And I think one of the things our partners and our employees are most proud of is the fact that they know we're not a perfect company, but we're also very willing to take the journey from being in a tough place of imperfection to try to really lead our industry to a better place. And they're proud of that. I mean, transparency is the name of the game. With social media these days, you can't avoid transparency, and I encourage you all to embrace transparency. It makes your employees very proud.
It's a really, really interesting point to me, and I'm going to ask our panel about how does social media actually affect how they conceive of the commitments they make, and how do they have how much public should the public know? How big should the public be that knows about your commitments, and how do you get it to that granular level of, let's say, tweets and Twitter, which for me as a long-form journalist, tweets and Twitter are still something that's a little bit beyond my reach.
So first, I would just want to say that I really applaud you for what you're doing, and agree definitely with the comments that engagement has so many different dimensions that you can do. In our case, the product that I spoke about before, the Clarity filter, was actually a direct outcome of an engagement program that is called Innovation for Good, where we take industrial designers, engineers, product engineers, and others who are interested, and we started actually working on a sandcast filter, which we had an NGO approach us about the fact that they wanted to improve sort of a very basic, cottage industry kind of a filter that has inherently a number of challenges, even as it is useful. And as people worked and got engaged, often on their own time even, the company encouraged them to do it, but also on their own time, to sort of problem solve this. We said, there might be some better technologies out there, and we're a water company. Who better than us to start thinking about these kind of things and resolve them? And in a lot of new initiatives, because I've been at Kohler for many years, and I've been sort of part of organizing and driving a few other initiatives, and you typically have to go to people and say, look, I'd like you to participate in this. Here's why this is important. We really need your help. And in this case, I had the opposite. I had people coming to me saying, hey, we're doing this thing in sustainability, we're doing this thing with product. But to both me and a number of the other people that started the program, and saying, how can I be part of this? This is really invigorating, this is really engaging. And when we go to college campuses, when we talk to, as an employment proposition to folks, people want to work for companies that, are financially responsible, but that also are making a contribution to society. Making a difference. Everybody wants to do that, and with the millennials, it's a particularly pronounced tendency. So it's been very invigorating for us to see that the uptake on these things is I won't say it just happens automatically, but it's something that's very intuitive to the audience that you have among your employees. And I don't think that Kohler is that unique. I think all of you can do the same thing.
So that's really interesting to me. I'm beginning to form myself a question at the end of this sequence, but before we get there, we certainly want to hear from John and then from Anna on these issues. How do you actually make it available and energizing to your own cadre of people who are your employees, who have their own issues, have their own lives, and so forth? It's very important to hear us, and I think it's very interesting to me to ask John and for all of us to consider, how does something as research-oriented as the findings that you sponsored with Harvard about clean air and the interior sequences in which so many millions of people work, how do you bring that home for those who will be using these values? How do you make it real to them, and how do you make it tangible so that we can get it for ourselves and look for those companies and those enterprises which are also concerned about this in the same way that we might be?
Well, the way you make it tangible is you have to relate buildings to people. In the first 20 years of this movement, the green building movement has been about how we reduce the built environment's impact on the natural environment. And that's so important, and we've made tremendous gains, and we have to continue doing that. There's no doubt about it. But going forward, we're going to have to relate how green buildings relate to people. If you look at the true cost of operating a building, an office building, 1% is energy. 90% is the salaries and the benefits of the people in the building. So I think we've actually been undervaluing the basis by which we make green building decisions. We've achieved 47%. Everybody in this room, this movement, has achieved 47% of commercial construction as green building construction, chasing 1% of the cost. Think how much farther and faster we can go when we chase the 90% of the cost, and that is the power.
That's a revelation.
That's the power of the research that the Harvard Center for Health and the Global Environment and the School of Public Health has brought forward to us. You know, we had 24 participants, volunteers, who went into a lab at Syracuse University at the Center of Excellence for 6 days, and they took standard cognitive tests, but under a controlled indoor environment. And what the study found definitively was that there was an impact on cognitive function. When the building was optimized to a green building condition, cognitive test scores doubled. And if you take that to a relation point to what that means for productivity, it's an 8% increase in productivity. Just for the salaries of those 24 people in the room that were studied, that meant it was a $6,500 per year boost for those people in the room. So there's tangible benefits here. Imagine how far we can take green buildings when we relate it to that level. And the co-benefits are health. You know, productivity is important. That's where we can base payback off of. But the co-benefits are health. These are healthier places for our people to work and live.
Well, I must say, I actually have to make a disclosure here. I'm a member of the advisory board to the Harvard School of Public Health, the Chang School of Public Health Center for Health and the Global Environment, and there are a whole bunch of those leaders are here today. So I'm very pleased to hear this about this sequence. But to me, you know, I wonder about, if I may ask the next question, about these issues. Is there a retrofit sequence? Because so much of the stock that people are living in today, whether it be housing, their residences or their places of employment, you know, have not had this insight and this information available to them. Are we looking at that going forward?
Yeah, the beauty of the analysis was that there was nothing exotic that was studied. And what it showed is that you can achieve these conditions in new buildings, in retrofit conditions, if you have the mindset to do it. Dr. Allen and his team have been here. In fact, they just did a sold-out education session right before the closing plenary on this. There's great data out there on that. We invite everybody to look at it. It's called the cogfxstudy.com. And we invite everybody to take a look at the data, because I think this is a catalyst for how we can accelerate the green building movement.
So, by no means last but not least, Anna, tell us how do you bring this forward?
Actually, I would like to begin by commenting one thing that you said, John, because there is actually a relation between energy savings and health and well-being. At least we think that, or we can prove that, because by the time that we have decreased our energy consumption, we also take surveys among our tenants, and we have found out that for each year that we've decreased the energy consumption in our building, the tenant satisfaction go up, and especially in the area of indoor environmental quality. So by focusing on reducing your energy consumption, you will operate your buildings better. And when you operate your buildings better, you will get a healthier indoor environmental quality. So actually you can go for both the 1% saving and those other
No,
savings.
absolutely. And the
There
goal
is
is
a
never
correlation,
to, the goal is never to, let your foot off the gas on energy efficiency. I mean, the pursuit of energy efficiency has to be relentless. But I think what this potentially can do is encourage more people to build more green buildings than otherwise wouldn't have. And we can achieve more energy savings while we're making our buildings more healthy and more productive for our people inside. The fact of the matter is, there's been an old paradigm that you either have energy efficiency or you have indoor environmental quality, but you can't have both. We now know you can have both, and together they're very, very powerful for the green building movement.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
you're talking about, the age-old paradigm of how do we make the business case for what we do, and I think we've gotten very good now at finally expanding the metrics of how we define the business case for green building. It always used to be on energy efficiency, and that always used to be our takeaway that we take to our leaders and say, all right, look at the ROI on energy efficiency, but now you have an ROI on people. And if you have one takeaway from this conference, I think it's investing in the health of your employees, or your tenants, or your residents, or however you define them, the people that are occupying the buildings. That is really going to be the next phase of green building. And I'm excited. You got the quantitative data now. I'd love to see it when we're done, but the aspect, we've always focused on the customer experience, and whether it's you go to Disney and they pipe smells into the certain places, for the Disney people, or we have the smell of coffee permeating throughout our stores, or whatever it happens to be. And we've always really focused on the customer experience, but the occupant experience and how well that drives, I think, engagement, and as you mentioned, health of those people occupying those buildings. There's a lot more ROI to play with there than there is around energy, without forgetting around energy and materials and all the things that we so focus on. That's my takeaway for the conference, so thanks for bringing that up.
I would say that the health and the green nexus, while for people like this audience that are highly informed, has been sort of in our face and ever present. I would submit that to the wider audience, there's still a lot of room to sort of educate the stakeholders that those two things actually go hand in hand, and that they just like cost and green. In fact, I think partly like in any other disciplines, we have a lot of vertical specialties within green, and creating good connections between those and showing the synergy of those things and how they work, I think it's really important. I think we do that well in our own community. I don't know that we do that so well with respect to the rest of the audience at large, who are largely ignorant of some of those kind of effects. One of my favorites is water and energy nexus. There's a very significant link. In fact, I think there's been a stats around for a while that in California, 20% of electricity is used to move water around. So when you're saving water, you're saving energy as well. Not that the state of California, given what's going on right now, needs any extra incentive, but I think it's looking at some of these connections and highlighting them, not to just ourselves as practitioners in the sustainability movement, but looking at this, across the board and really sort of driving this home with the general public and the decision makers, I think is really key. So.
I think that what I'm hearing in the broadest sense, and I think we're all hearing it, is sort of healthy planet, healthy planet, healthy humanity, and each one of these contact points for the companies and the enterprises that our panel work for are leading us to understand the nature and the dynamics of those contact points in a brand new way, in a much more holistic way, I would say. And that's not just an absent term. I think it's a very important term. I would say also that from my experience at NPR, almost 10 years there as president and CEO, and then with the NPR Foundation, what I found unique to the encounter between NPR, and I think it applies here, is that it was actually turned out not to be a transactional relationship with listeners and their stations and NPR, a program provider. It turned out to be a values relationship. And I think that's what you're all talking about in a completely different, in a different context, because what we're hearing here is this focus and refocus on delivering value for, in effect, the same transaction that wasn't there thought about in the same way before. And I think that's really a very powerful takeaway from this panel. So how do you measure at that delivery point? And I'm just going to put this open. I'm going to start perhaps with John, who's here on the closest to me, and also has, in speaking about what they found in the studies they've made about the rise of productivity. How do you deliver that to a potential customer or a builder or an architect in a way that makes it tangible to them? It seems very ephemeral in a way to say that you can actually raise the productivity of the people in that structure. How do you deliver that again? I want to hear a little more if we can hear that.
Well, this is a question people in this room, in the marketplace, they've been asking this for 20 years. You know, intuitively, we've all experienced that better environments, better indoor environmental quality, we feel better, we perform better. I mean, how many of us have been in a room after lunch that's not well ventilated and the CO2 builds up and you get sleepy, you get groggy, you're not going to make good decisions. So we've all experienced it one way or another. Now we actually have the scientific data behind it to understand why it happens and what particular cognitive domains it impacts one over another. In this study, for example, it was a doubling of cognitive impact across 9 different areas, but in 3 areas particularly stood out. In the number 1 area, there was actually a 300% increase in cognitive function on information usage. And so we're in a clicking society. We click through everything to gather data, but it's actually what do we do with it to turn it into knowledge? And what we can find now is that green buildings can improve the way we do that and improve the way we actually use information in our lives, in our businesses. And so how do we deliver it? This is a proposition that people have been looking for. And so I think the delivery is actually going to be quite easy because people are going to understand and intuitively know that this is true. Now there's scientific data behind it.
So I'd like to say we're coming to a bit of we've got a few more minutes left here, and I want to ask, leading out from what John has just said, I want to ask our panel to tell us, in their view, what one thing would they tell other companies, other enterprises, who may not be embracing what is generally known as environmental social governance. They call it ESG. That's a brand new term. I hadn't heard it until this morning, as we were talking backstage about what their views are. So when it comes to environmental social governance, what do you tell other companies who may not be, they're not here maybe today, or else they're here as looking on and wondering themselves what they should be doing? How do you make that viable in their activities going forward?
I think it's quite simple. Be a part of this, or you will go bankruptcy.
So the comment I would make is align the ESG with your brand and with your business. There's way too many people that I see who are well-intentioned and want to do this, but it winds up being a check-the-box kind of an exercise. Yes, we've done the donations. Yes, we have a green brochure. Yes, we have a social responsibility statement. And here are some of the charity things that we're doing. And I don't mean to knock that. Certainly that's better than not doing anything. But if you really want to drive this, you have to figure out what are your core competencies in your various businesses, if you have more than one line like we do, and to understand how are you going to synergize that so that it's constructive for the business, that it's a win for the business, a win for the customer, a win for your associates, and a win for the other stakeholders. How are you going to create that environment? It's not easy to do that. It requires some serious brain sweat to do that right. But it's well worth the investment because when you do, it reflects in your products, in your brand, in your employee value proposition. All of those things tend to synergize and help you drive forward. And then you don't have to sort of prompt people, hey, have you done this ESG thing? It becomes part of the fabric of what you do every day. And I can't say that we're there, but we're driving. That's one of our pillars of our strategies to actually drive that. So.
It's a sort of version of what used to be called QC, quality control, but in a much more different and sort of
Absolutely
synergistic way.
Right. I mean,
Jim.
I guess my take on that is ask your leaders how they define success. I mean, we've always struggled in the sustainability field of using our own set of metrics, and often, like Anna, sometimes we need a translator up here to help understand, what we're saying to our leaders. And I remember when I first started with Starbucks, it was always going to the business and saying, all right, here's your sustainability targets, go meet them. And the challenge we always faced was, yes, we're absolutely a values-driven company, but everyone uses their own set of metrics to define success. And you heard some very different stories up here from some very leading industries, but each of us define success in different ways. And I talked about the emotional connection that's essential for Starbucks and our success. That's how we define success. That doesn't apply to every business in the room, and that doesn't apply to all of you. So you really need to dive deep into the business, as Davor was saying, and understand what the metrics are that drive your business success, and then show the business how you can help them achieve their targets. And almost reverse the conversation. Every year we go through our goal setting, and every company does this, and you say, here's your sustainability metrics, here's your green building metrics. I would almost reverse that conversation and go to your business units, whether it be operations or construction or whatever it happens to be, and say, you tell me your targets for the year. I'm going to show you how I'm going to help you meet your targets through sustainability, through green building, through this engagement, through the health we've talked about of the employees, and really help accelerate the profitability of your business by doing that. You'll get much more traction in that space, and I think that's something I've learned at Starbucks, which is a values-driven company, but we're also a profit-driven company. And that balance we've created between values and profitability has been essential for us, but we've done that because everything we do is focused on the value of the business. And the focus and the value of that business is creating that emotional connection I talked about, and creating those very proud partners who love this company, but it's also creating the opportunity for the business to continue to grow, continue to make profitability and meet our shareholders' values, and you need to be able to demonstrate that you contribute to those.
I think Anna has it right. I mean, I can't imagine how any business is going to succeed going forward without embracing sustainability and ESG. We talked about employee engagement before. We see it firsthand. So people who are interested in jobs at United Technologies, their number one jump point from our employment page is to our sustainability page. We see it every day. People who are not embracing this are going to miss the best talent, the best opportunities. And at United Technologies, we define sustainability this way. We can do good for the planet while we do good for our customers, while we do good for our shareholders. There's no reason why you can't do all three together. And anybody that's not looking at it that way, I think, will place themselves at a competitive disadvantage.
And even outside the field of sustainability, I mean, outside sustainability, one of the recent metrics that I'd love to share, and I'm going to share it because we have a captive audience here, is we recently announced as a company that we're going to provide 4 years of free tuition for all of our employees. So you work, thanks, and you work 20 hours or more a week, and we'll give you free tuition. And if you're a veteran, we'll give free tuition for one of your kids or your family members as well. But that's a fantastic social program. But we also know that it absolutely contributes to that engagement we're talking about. And we also know that that's a huge investment that's absolutely going to pay for itself in recruitment and retention. And the fact that I'm so proud of today, and it's really exciting that we're able to see today, is that 60% of new applicants to Starbucks now say they cite this education benefit as the reason they're applying for the company. And if you're in HR, you work with HR, there's money in that. So that is a huge essential asset. And those are the kind of things that we need to continue to prove as sustainability professionals, is how we drive the success of the business.
So I might say that at the College of Journalism at the University of Maryland in College Park, just on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., we have a brand new building. It opened about 4 years ago. It's been rated a LEED Gold building, and I think that's actually that's meaningful to parents who are thinking about they've got a child who actually wants to be a journalist, and the journalism I started in was a for-profit enterprise. It's a lot harder to get that way in journalism these days, but it's a much more interesting field for kids. But the idea that they can do much of their studying in a LEED Gold building, I think actually has meaning in their thinking and in the values of that family. So we're very pleased to have that rating, but also to say here, to our colleagues and to you all that these kinds of conversations and this kind of colloquy amongst knowledgeable professionals whose companies and enterprises have devoted themselves and to both research and the constant staying on the course, going back again and again with resilience and taking it to their shareholders and to their boards and making sure that the clarity of their commitment is known to everybody. I want to thank you all for telling us very well today that there's more work to be done. Thank you all so very much. Bye-bye.
What a different world it would be if all the world's top players in the business sectors that are represented there and so many other sectors had the same kind of enlightened views that were just shared. It's a special place, Greenbuild, where you get to hear people who have really thought this through, and it's extremely, extremely encouraging. I'll be introducing shortly Dr. Joseph Romm, and let me just sketch out some of his remarkable accomplishments, any one of which would be enough for most of us. He's an MI-trained physicist. He's served as a senior executive at the Department of Energy. He oversees the blog Climate Progress. And this is the part I really was envious of. His website was named one of the top environmental websites, and he was named one of the 100 people changing the world by Rolling Stone. Oh my God. That reminded me, as I was looking at that this morning, that how proud I was when my 84-year-old dad was referenced in the Rolling Stone because his neighbor, the comedian Bill Murray, said, "I have this really kind of cranky neighbor, Frank Platt, who is, gotten me into poetry for some reason." And we were so proud, and I'm just sure that Joe Romm's family is, and his children, if he has children, are unbelievably proud. Rolling Stone. Now, Joe's latest book, Climate Change, What Everyone Needs to Know, was deemed by the Guardian newspaper, the climate primer you've been waiting for. And again, I'll take a presidential prerogative, and it will be required reading for all of us that are going to Paris to the climate change conference. And maybe we can get it as required reading for our wonderful friends from the World Green Building Council. 20 World Green Building Councils will also be represented in Paris to read this book, because what it does is it finally makes this personal. It makes it about our lives. Climate change affects us as individuals. And as Rick said in the opening plenary, it's really not about the rock that spins through the universe called the Earth. That's going to do just fine. It's about people. It's about you and I. I mean, honestly, it's not about the polar bears anymore, too. I mean, we all love the polar bears. I have a colleague here who's just always saying, can we just forget about the polar bears just for a second? Because the point is, it's about human beings. And until we all think about it in that way, and we can bring it down to our daily lives and think about what we can do to make a difference, it's still going to be this abstraction. So I want to, as we get ready to hear from Joe, who really is a spectacularly expert person on all matters to do with climate change, I do want to share a few thoughts about the fact that we are heading to Paris, to the City of Lights, a wonderful contingent from USGBC, including your existing and your future chairman of the board. And you can all be very proud that we'll have a major contingent there. And of course, like so many people in this room, after the terrible attacks on Friday, I called up a bunch of my friends in Paris, some that work for USGBC, member companies like Saint-Gobain, some that work at the United Nations, just to make sure their families were okay. And I wasn't going to do this, but because of the awful terrorist attack that's occurred this morning in Mali, a country that, because the people don't maybe look like us, we don't really focus on so much. But Mali had a terrible attack this morning, and scores and scores of people have been killed by these Al-Qaeda terrorists this time. And so if we could just have 30 seconds of silence for those who were lost in Paris and any of your friends in Paris who might have been traumatized by that, and then also for our brothers and sisters in Mali, just a few seconds of silence. Thank you. Thank you. So what I think is exciting about our visit to Paris is that those who have been to these giant UN events in the past, again, very easily get cynical, but there have been some significant changes that are giving me some confidence that there could be a sense more of how interdependent we all are. And so I want to mention at least 3 things that have changed since prior meetings. One is that the United States and China have begun to do some very important discussions as the 2 biggest carbon emitters. The fact that they weren't terribly engaged made some of the other meetings a bit academic. So that's one big change. There are also a lot of very, very impressive people that have been doing a lot of the early negotiations amid the 160 countries that'll be involved. And then again, in an amazing Greenbuild moment, one of those individuals, Dave Reifsnyder, was actually at the international summit. And those who were there could just sense in what capable hands this negotiation was going to be in. That's a difference because, quite honestly, this tends to sometimes devolve into a terrible fight between people that are thinking in a very small way. Sometimes dictators from certain countries, sometimes democracies that are acting crazy, but basically I see real change in which everybody seems to understand, and this seems to me to be similar to the point in Joe's book, that we all need to do something. It's not just about the nations and the heads of nations. Cities will be better represented than ever before there, NGOs, and most importantly, businesses. Because again, as Rick was pointing out, it's just not at the White House back in 1990 or whatever that businesses feel like the skunk at the garden party. At the UN, that's a real issue. And so the very fact that they're, for the first time, going to have a series of events that are very focused on what industry can do, including, for the very first time, and we're very proud of this, a Buildings Day at the COP to focus specifically on how buildings can be part of the solution. And again, working with the, it's a great moment. So working with our great friends from the World Green Building Council, we are going to do our best to really send a signal, a market signal. If you think about it, these politicians get together, and it's my sense that they talk in these very obtuse terms about carbon trading and about price signals and all this stuff that really people don't understand. And I have gone sort of hoarse telling the people at the United Nations what part of 2 million square feet a day of certified green buildings is not a market signal. What part of what the people in this room are helping to accomplish to really communicate the value of a green economy before some blowhard government official says it's important is missing. in the debate. So to be there as a community for all of us to send the message that we're taking action, there's work to be done, so we're doing it well before these bozos get together and have an agreement. That's a little harsh, but. So as we get together, one of the things that I want to just note in closing before we bring on Joe is just 2 points. One, that the UN is beginning to get this, and I shouldn't be so tough on them. Last year, Rick Fedrizzi and I, on behalf of all of you who are members of USGBC, if you're not a member, quickly become a member so that I can praise you as well. All of you, on your behalf, USGBC got the Champions of the Earth Award, the highest honor that the UN can bestow, typically on individuals, but in this case, on an organization because of you. So they do get it. They do now have this Buildings Day, which is exciting. And what I plan to do with our contingent is to make sure that we take the lessons of Greenbuild to the COP. So I'm going to be looking for the tamales lady. I'm going to be looking for the person, maybe from a country that isn't known to us as a power player, but really helps build trust, because a lot of the countries in the world do not trust us when we say we're going to do a lot of things to help the environment. Secondly, I want to bring the spirit of the commitments that were made connecting green to human health. Because you go to an event like the COP, and unless green is about the bare necessities of a better life, a healthier life, it seems very, very trivial to lots of folks there. So I want to bring that spirit of the commitment that Lend-Lease made. And then finally, if I find a gloomy environmentalist that is very distressed about the overwhelming data points and the polar bears, I plan to give them just a little bit of a shoulder rub and say, we're in this together. So with that, let me bring on the wonderful Joe Romm.
Howdy, hello. I am so fired up to be here and to talk to so many people who are making such a difference in this transition to a carbon-free, sustainable world that we have been dawdling in, but finally are really taking seriously. I have a very long history with the U.S. Green Building Council, as people may know. Actually, back in 1994, the U.S. Green Building Council peer-reviewed the first paper I ever wrote on this subject, co-authored with green building guru Bill Browning, Greening the Building and the Bottom Line, Increasing Productivity Through Energy-Efficient Design. And I will come back to that towards the end, because I think we've had a revolution in understanding on this subject. Rick Fedrizzi is an old friend of mine. He actually was, he's, I think, responsible for more sales of my books than anyone else. He was very good when he was at Carrier, and then when he left Carrier, I actually was able to employ him briefly at my Center for Energy and Climate Solutions before he got this gig, and really he and Christine Urban turned this into you know, I think one of the seminal energy and environmental achievements of recent memory, and something that people need to know a lot more about. Christine Urban was someone I worked at the Department of Energy. She was acting Assistant Secretary of Energy for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and I was her deputy. And then when she went to the White House, I became acting Assistant Secretary. DOE was a great learning experience for me. And since we're here in DC, one of the things I learned at the Department of Energy was the definition of the word politics. It comes from the Greek word poly, meaning many, and ticks, meaning small blood-sucking insects. More seriously, I believe, quote, science is my passion, politics my duty. The president who said science is my passion, politics my duty, actually has a monument not very far from here. It's Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, aside from all of his other accomplishments, was president of America's oldest scientific society, which was founded by the great American scientist, Ben Franklin. Interestingly, Jefferson was not only president of America's oldest scientific society, he was president during his entire tenure as vice president of the United States and as president of the United States. It would be as if Barack Obama was also the head of the American Association for the Advancement of Science at the same time that he was president. The founding fathers all had a passion for science, and something was taken for granted that people would know science, would appreciate science, and as did the president who signed into law the creation of the National Academy of Sciences to provide the country the best scientific advice, and that was Abraham Lincoln, who was the only U.S. president to hold a patent for an invention. So let me talk briefly about some of the things that I have learned and have put into this book. For the last 10 years, I have been doing climate communications. And one of the things that I learned, certainly one of the things that all of you who are communicators of your work is 4 words that I learned from Ed Maybach of George Washington University. The single most important message about communication: stories sell, numbers numb. And if you're not telling a story, you're not communicating. And if you're using too many numbers, then you are also not communicating. I've added charts charm. I have a chart here of a graphic from Quartz, which shows that if you're communicating online or with a group of people, the thing you want to do is use charts and photography. That's what draws people in. My climate story began when I had been doing clean energy consulting for a decade after I left the Department of Energy, working with people on getting them to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, to design green buildings and the like. And then my brother lost his home in Hurricane Katrina. He lived in Pass Christian, Mississippi. 1 mile inland, there was 20 feet of water in his home. In the storm surge, it was like, he described it like his contents of his home had been turned upside down like a washing machine. And because he knew that I was a physicist who had studied physical oceanography, he asked me if he should rebuild his home. And I started going to lectures and seminars from the top scientists in the world. This was 10 years ago, and reading the literature and talking to as many scientists in private as I could. And I learned at the time, back then, that the situation was considerably more dire than I thought. And I also learned that scientists were doing a very lousy job of communicating that. So that's why I stopped doing clean energy consulting and started doing communications full time. And I launched Climate Progress, which now has become, I think, the most widely read climate blog in the world. Mostly I have been communicating to progressive audiences, because I work at the Center for American Progress, but recently we've merged into the broader Think Progress website, so I try to reach a general audience now, and Oxford University Press asked me to write this book, part of their What Everyone Needs to Know series, which is all in Q&A format, all for a general audience, to bring anyone up to speed on climate change, clean energy solutions, the negotiation process that's going on in Paris. So let me quickly run through just a few of the charts that I have used over the years recently that I think are the most salient. this is a chart we put up a few years ago, just to make clear. This is a chart of temperature versus time, starting 10,000 years ago. Do it here. Starting 10,000 years ago until today. This is where we are today. This is based on an article in the journal Science. During human civilization, temperature was very flat. That's what made modern agriculture, modern civilization possible. It allowed us to go from millions of people to billions of people. All those billions of people settled in a place where agriculture, rainfall, river run, snowmelt, all that was relatively constant over the course of 10,000 years. We are now in the process of changing what had started to be a slow cooling over the last 5,000 years. We're now heating up the planet 50 times faster than the planet had been naturally cooling due to orbital changes. So needless to say, this is a radical shift. And if we let it go up here, we will have put what will then be 10 billion people in the wrong location on the planet. Everyone's living for a stable climate here. Climate's going to be up here. Sea level's going to be different. Rainfall's going to be different. Everything's going to be different. Needless to say, they're going to want to be in a different place than they are. And we all see how difficult refugee crises are. We all see the tensions that are created when people run out of water and arable land. The temperature just keeps going up. I wanted to include this chart, not because anyone in this audience is unaware of the fact that the planet keeps warming up, but this is going to be the hottest year on record by far. This is 2014. This star is what 2015 is going to be. I know some of you may have heard in the media that there was some sort of slowdown in global warming or pause or hiatus. This is a very it didn't happen. It only happened if you took that 1998 peak, the last El Nino we had, and compared it to some recent La Niñas, and then if you repeated that message about 1 million times, as the fossil fuel funded disinformation campaign was very good at doing. But as you can see, the planet just keeps warming, and in fact, there's some evidence that we're about to start an accelerated warming. This is where 2015 will be, and 2016 right now is likely to be higher than that. So the kind of extreme weather we've seen in recent years, that's going to speed up in the next decade or two. And the point that I was actually making in the book, and the point that I make when I talk to a general audience rather than a highly informed audience like you, is that everybody needs to know about climate change, regardless of their politics, regardless of whether they're going to become politically active, simply because climate change is going to affect you and your family over the next 25 years as much as the internet did in the last 25 years. And the people who are informed can be the smart money, and the people who aren't informed, they're just going to make not as good decisions. And obviously, if you had known 25 years ago where the internet would be today, you could have made a whole bunch of very smart investments and decisions about where you could be, what you could be educated in, or what your kids could study. Well, we know now with very high confidence, unprecedented in all of human civilization, how the next few decades are going to play out roughly. Not exactly. Can't tell you year by year, but we pretty much know what's going to happen. One of the things that we know that's going to happen is coastal properties are going to crash. It is inevitable because, again, all the coastlines of the world were built around relatively stable seas. Seas are no longer stable. They are rising, and they are rising at the high end of what we thought. The only reason that there are people who have coastal property in any of the areas of the country that get significant storms because you and I insure them through the National Flood Insurance Program. It has exploded to over $1 trillion in flood insurance, half of which is in Florida. If Florida were to get hit, when Florida gets hit by a Superstorm Sandy or Katrina, that will be $500 billion in losses. I don't think the state of Florida, I don't think private insurers, I don't think anyone but you and I are going to pick up that tab. We will bail them out. It is inevitable. This is going to crash. It's either going to crash when the storm comes, it's going to crash when Banks stop doing 30-year mortgages on homes that ultimately are going to be worthless. Or it's going to stop actually when the federal government stops spending $100 million a year replenishing the sand on U.S. beaches in order to prop up coastal property values. But in any case, I would say, as I do in the book and as I have on the blog, sometime in the next 10 or 20 years, the smart money is going to get out. And the question is, do you want to be the smart money or the other kind of money? People simply need to know this. Huge decisions have to be made, as I said. The same is true for where to live. This is a map of soil moisture projected for the second half of the century from NASA. -3 is roughly what the Dust Bowl was. But this isn't just the worst case. This is just the average climate for the United States of America and our southern neighbors in the second half of the century if we keep pouring unrestricted amounts of carbon pollution. So we are going to turn the great breadbasket of the United States, as well as the Southwest, into a hot Dust Bowl-like condition if we don't get our act in order soon, and we're going to have to deal with some of this anyway. So all the people in this country in the last 50 years who've moved from up here to down here, they're all going to move back. Or not all of them, but a great many of them are going to move back in the second half of this century. So those who are planning on retirement in Phoenix, Arizona, or of course Miami Beach in the next 10 or 20 years, I would A, either urge you to reconsider, or B, rent. Your portfolio in general, if you have a typical portfolio, is not hedged against the climate risk. It's not hedged against the collapse of fossil fuel, of the market capitalization of fossil fuel stocks. It's not hedged against coastal property values declining. There's a study that just came out. Climate change puts everyone's portfolio at risk. Now, it's clear that coal has become a dead end. It's still doing gangbusters, but its future is so grim that the market cap of all the coal stocks have plummeted. And as an international tradable commodity, its price is in the doghouse. Next to come, of course, is oil. Because I actually think that humanity is smart enough not to destroy the United States of America and the rest of the world through dust bowlification. So we're going to leave most of the fossil fuels in the ground, and that means that all the market caps of all the oil companies that are built around endlessly burning fossil oil that they have in their reserves and oil that they expect to have in their reserves, that's all a fantasy. And that's why there's been this big divestment movement, and the smart money is already moving out. Over time, over the next 10 to 20 years, as people realize, hey, climate change is real, like all the scientists have been saying for decades, we're not going to burn all those fossil fuels. People are going to realize that. So obviously, trillions of dollars of market capitalization in fossil fuel companies is at risk. And the smart money, as I say, is pulling out. The not-so-smart money is going to find itself with a portfolio for retirement that isn't as large as they thought. Wrong button. There we go. I don't want to spend a lot of time. These slides are for a general audience. Everyone in this audience knows the price of solar power dropped 99% in the last 25 years. And this is a new chart, just came out from Ernie Moniz at the Department of Energy. They updated their 5 technologies report in advance of Paris, in advance of the big climate talks that are starting in 2 weeks. You can find this chart online. So this is the index cost reductions just since 2008 of land-based wind, distributed PV, utility-scale PV, modeled battery costs, and LEDs. LEDs, for instance, have dropped 90% in cost in just the last 6 years. We all know that the inflection point on solar was hit 5, 6, 7 years ago, and the market has just exploded since then. If you look at battery pricing, it's clear that we're probably 3 or 4 years away from the same exact thing happening in batteries. So I would expect the same market inflection point for electric cars to start to occur over the next few years, and 2020 will be the same kind of inflection point where electric vehicles just take over the marketplace. And one can thank Elon Musk and Tesla, really, for jump-starting that. The thing that I lifted this off of the U.S. Green Building Council website, and it's a little busy for a slide, so Roberto in the back helped me do this to it. There we go. For 20 years, we have been studying and finding out that green buildings make the workplace more productive. And dozens and dozens of studies have found this out. Bill Browning and I, we did a collection of anecdotal case studies back in 1994, and I collected more for my book, Cool Companies, in 1999. But you guys have been building green buildings, and the academics have been studying them. People like Vivian Lofness at Carnegie Mellon, and so we've documented this now. And this is so widely accepted that even the International Energy Agency came out with a report saying, all those energy efficiency savings we can use to reduce carbon pollution. Well, as it turns out, they generate larger savings from their non-energy benefits, from their reduced pollution, from the health and productivity investments. And we know, in particular, the number that's most interesting, sorry about that, can we get the slide back up? That you get this productivity benefit from a better ventilation. And John Mandyck mentioned this amazing breakthrough study that was done by the Harvard School of Public Health and the State University of New York researchers. And this is really seminal research, and I'm so glad to be able to build on what he said just a little bit. The point is, why, for instance, does better ventilation make it healthier and increase productivity in the workplace? And is it the VOCs? Is it the particulates? What is it? And this study looked at that question. And I have lifted one slide here, which everyone has to read this study. I don't know if Joe Allen gave a talk earlier and people heard it, but this is the seminal green building study of our time, because it explains the great mystery of, or one of the great mysteries of why it exactly is that better ventilation increases productivity. And the reason is that, so this is CO2 concentration, 500 parts per million, 1,000 parts per million, 1,500 parts per million, versus, of measures of cognitive function, basic activity level, crisis response, information usage, and strategy. And what they found, they did measurements principally around 1,500 parts per million and 950 parts per million, which is to say, this is a office setting laboratory that you put people in, and you can control the CO2 separate from everything else, double blind. Researchers don't know the CO2 level. They don't know the CO2 level. They're given cognitive function tests. And as you can see, many of the results were below 700, and the results were linear, which is to say, as you go from 500 parts per million to 1,000 to 1,500, you were getting a drop in information usage, strategy, basic activity level. And we all know that the outdoor CO2 levels are the baseline for the indoor CO2 levels. So we have entered a world where, although we evolved for hundreds of thousands of years at 180 to 280 parts per million, and even through the development of modern civilization, it was still 280 parts per million, and we didn't have huge numbers of people living in sealed buildings through most of civilization. In the last 50 years, however, we've done two things. We've amped up outdoor CO2 levels to 400 parts per million or higher, and we've stuck people in buildings that don't have the best ventilation because you haven't been building them all. There's only so many hours in the day for all of you. So as a result, we're routinely getting considerably higher CO2 levels indoors than outdoors. And that is one of the reasons why we have all of these studies showing productivity declines indoors, kids doing poorer in classrooms when the ventilation rates are high. I spoke to the guy who was hired by the British government to study CO2 levels in classrooms, and he concluded that there should be a CO2 monitor in every classroom because when they hit 800 to 1,000 parts per million, the test scores start going down and people should open the window. So we need a whole transformation of the green buildings and the marketing of green buildings and informing people of the fact that it isn't just hand-waving anymore, that green buildings increase productivity and that improved ventilation make people more productive and improve the test scores of our kids. It's now documented science. We actually know the causation mechanism. I actually spoke, by the way, to the chief scientist, the chief doctor in charge of the International Space Station, where they have high CO2 levels. They have come to the same conclusion. So let me wrap up briefly. The Paris climate talks, we were on a track for 900 parts per million. At 900 parts per million outdoors, guess what? It's going to be well above 900 indoors. Now, with the commitments that were made to Paris based on the advances in clean technology and country commitments, we're now on track for 675 parts per million. Needless to say, if it's 675 outdoors, it's still going to be hard to get below 900 indoors. So Paris is the first step. It is the first time the countries of the world have come together to get us off the business as usual path, which would have been catastrophic, and put us onto a pathway which is not safe, but it at least means that the next agreement, the Paris commitments all end in 2030, so they couldn't solve the problem by itself. We're going to need commitments through 2040, 2050, until every country in the world goes down to zero carbon. So we're all going to be zero carbon by the end of the century. So let me just wrap up here. I think that we've moved from a situation 20 years ago where scientists warned us that if we kept pouring unrestricted carbon pollution into the air, we would be like that smoker with the hacking cough who kept smoking. Things would start happening. We'd see extreme weather, high temperatures, we'd see mega droughts, we'd see terrible storm surges. We're seeing it all. What they said is true, not a big shock. Now they're saying, time's up, we get our act in order now, we can avoid catastrophe for our children, but we've dawdled for so long, we have to act. The good news is that on the science, although the disinformation campaign remains well-funded, it's getting harder and harder for politicians to deny the science. They have moved into the idiotic phrase, I'm not a scientist, as a defense. They're not anything. Politicians aren't healthcare experts, but they vote on that. We hire them. We hire our representatives not because they're experts. Their job is to represent us. They go and talk to the experts so that 350 million Americans don't have to become expert on the subject. They find the experts, talk to them, ask their opinion, tell them to study the issue, give them input, and then they take it. And interestingly enough, we did all that except the last thing. We set up the international, the IPCC. We set up a whole panel on climate change, the world's experts reporting every 5 years. And they've been reporting every 5 years for the last 25 years, each 5 years getting more desperate and dire, saying, please listen to us, we're even more right than we were before, and things are more dire because we've dawdled. So we haven't been listening. So, but the good news, as I said, is the other side is the deniers, are at least toning down the attacks of the science. And this means that it's time to shift towards the message of morality, and that's what the Pope has done. He's said, we know the science enough to say inaction is immoral. And, you know, Martin Luther King, a great moral crusader, wrote from his jail cell in Birmingham, half century ago, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Now more than ever, we are tied in a single garment of destiny, cloaked as a species in a protective climate that we are in the process of unraveling. And so the need for activism, the need to speak out is great as ever. Just to quote the Pope, we must regain the conviction that we need one another, that we have a shared responsibility for others and the world, and that being good and decent are worth it. And as King put it, we will have to repent in this generation not merely for the vitriolic words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. Everyone in this audience is doing more than most people. And James Cameron at the opening plenary, he asked everyone if they would do more and change their diet. I'm asking you to do one thing more, which is to speak out, to talk to people, to not feel uncomfortable talking about climate change, but at Thanksgiving, at Christmas, people have to understand this is a serious business. We run out of time. We are going to have to go to zero carbon emissions by the end of the century. Every single country is. We're going to do it by using all the technologies and strategies that you have all demonstrated. And so congratulations on picking the right field, the one that's going to be the growth field in the coming decades. It has been my great pleasure to speak to you today. I can tell you I brought a CO2 monitor. It's only 740 parts per million here. So cognitive function stayed up reasonably high. Last place I spoke, it got up to 1,500 parts per million, so I had an excuse. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe Rahm. He is a bona fide genius, folks, and will scare the hell out of you. The only thing I feel really good about is Joe continually proves to me that my keeping my home in Syracuse, New York is a really good thing to do. Syracuse will be North Carolina in about 33 years, so that's all good. Hey, I know we are wrapping up right now. I hope you all had an amazing Greenbuild this year, because I did. And I know you all know that I've given my notice, but I will be seeing you all in LA next year, because I'm not gone until the end of 16. So you're going to be next year going, I thought this guy left already, but I'm still going to be around. So let's go with that. Hey, I got one more thing to do. I have got to show all of you the amazing group of people at USGBC that every single day get out of bed and carry forward the mission for this great organization. They're the ones that answer your phone calls. They're the ones that help you understand some of the things that we make a little too complex sometimes, and then we try to continually get better day after day. I want to bring up my staff right now. We're in DC. We can't do this in any other city. So first, would Mahesh Ramanujam come up here? Mahesh Ramanujam. This is my Indian brother, and my American brother. Yes, we're going to have some fun in the year ahead. Right now, I'd like to bring up the core staff. These are the leaders of the entire team at USGBC behind me. Many of them you recognize. I want to bring up all of our staff, and I want to bring up our integrated chapter, our new members of our team. And I want to bring up our team from India and our team from Amsterdam and our folks that work with us in China, South America. Come right up here because these are the folks that make it happen. I told you the other day, come on up. Everybody get your cameras ready. I hope this isn't one of those YouTube moments where the stage goes down, but that wouldn't be pretty. But folks, I get a lot of credit for this organization because I'm loud and I'm out front most of the time. But these are the folks that make it happen every single day. And these are the folks that care deeply about this mission. It's the most amazing group of people I've ever met in my entire life. If you read my book, I call them my DC family that gave me the courage to live a life I never thought I would. Thank you, all of you. I love you all. Awesome. And now will Kimberly Lewis please come here and take us home?
All right, to our Greenbuild peeps, are you in the house? All right, family, has DC been as monumental as we said it would be?
Yeah.
To the amazing folks of USGBC National Capital Chapter, are you in the house? Emily English, Jenny and Susie, and to our amazing host committee chairs, Jessica Long and Kimberly Pexton, you all are amazing. And we have had a monumental week. And just so you know, the road to Greenbuild has been amazing, but our eyes are heading west. Brendan, get your bike ready. Rick is trying to either have a bike tour, a car race, but the journey continues west. Iconic green, all the folks of USGBC LA, here we come.